As many are now finding out, Black Myth Wukong is one of the biggest games of 2024. This game is described as an action RPG rooted in Chinese mythology. You play as the Destined One, and you venture into challenges, take on bosses, and marvels ahead to uncover the obscure truth beneath the veil of a glorious legend from the past. That is the description of the game from the developers at Game Science, a studio that is pretty much relatively unknown. Chinese developers, I think they worked on a couple mobile games in past, but this is their first AAA experience. And a couple of years ago, Black Myth Wukong came onto the national or international spotlight because of a tech demo in which we saw a boss fight. It looked extremely impressive, and this is finally the final product. And there's been a lot of controversy surrounding this game, and it really has exposed the issue with game reviews, specifically one that a lot of people have been talking about. But overall, if you actually do check Black Myth Wukong on Metacritic or OpenCritic or any of these aggregators, it's been pretty positive. 82 on Metacritic out of 57 critic reviews. Most of them, again, there's nothing too low, nothing too high. Most of them say it's a pretty darn fun action game with some major performance issues. Again, we'll go to OpenCritic. You can, again, see the same thing. It has 36 reviews, a bunch of 80s. Again, it's 71% of critics recommend the game. And then these are some of the impressions from NoobFeed. Black Myth Wukong is a fantastic game and lives up to its hype. It's an exciting but challenging journey with a distinct setting and approach. GG Recon says Wukong infuses the cultural heritage of China, its rich mythology, and one of its most important pieces of literature with an action RPG structure that's as deep as it's grand in scale. A PC Gamer giving it an 87, saying Wukong blossoms with an eccentric cast of characters and expressive combat, all wrapped up in the rich world of its source material. IGN even giving it a positive review, 8 out of 10, saying despite some frustrating technical issues, Wukong is a great action game with fantastic combat, exciting bosses, tantalizing secrets, and a beautiful world. So this looks like an extremely fun experience, and on Steam it is absolutely blowing up right now. Almost 1.5 million players, and I think this showcases the powerhouse that this game is in China. Game Science, a Chinese developer, and I do think if you look at the coverage in terms of maybe the United States, Europe, and really every other country outside of China, there hasn't been a lot of coverage from games media, at least until recent memory, and I just don't think anybody was expecting this type of response. But it goes to show that inside of China, people were extremely excited about this game, and I'd be really interested to see the breakdown, because I do think that we're seeing a lot of gamers across the world extremely excited for the game, but maybe 1.5 million is insane. Again, we have also seen that it is breaking records. That's my point with this, bringing this up. Hours after release, Wukong is a huge hit on Steam, and yeah, to put that in perspective, as you can see, Cyberpunk 2077 it debuted with over 1 million players. That was the excitement. That was the years of anticipation. 1 million players at launch. This has 1.5 million. It's actually, I think, moved into the top 5. It's in front of, yeah, it's right close to Counter-Strike 2. Counter-Strike 2 had 1.8 million, its all-time peak. Wukong already has 1.5, and it could be rising at the time of recording this video. It just goes to show that people are extremely excited about this game. Now, it is also worth mentioning that this game has been mired in controversy for a while. This specific IGN report that came about Game Science back in November of 2023 has been ridiculed by a lot of individuals, as it makes a couple of points that even myself, I take massive issues with this reporting. How Black Myth Wukong developers' history of that is complicating its journey to the West, which is the source material that it's based on. And the report, the big thing, I talked about this in a couple of news videos in the past, but IGN spoke to several women familiar with gaming culture in China. In the eyes of many female players, Game Science has a notable negative reputation. This isn't reporting, this is anecdotal stuff, and it just, I take issue with also a lot of the translations of some of the stuff that they point out about as an example that Game Science is sexist. It just, there's so many problems with this report, and a lot of people have been pointing attention at this, saying that this is horrible reporting. And the problem with this is the fact that IGN, whenever they have anything related to Black Myth Wukong, they link to this report, and other outlets do the same. And it paints an image about this developer, which a lot of individuals on the internet obviously have taken issue with, even some Chinese gamers and some Chinese female gamers. And specifically, we had this article just recently. Chinese gamer refutes IGN's accusations against Black Myth Wukong developer Game Science, but condemns developers' statements as unprofessional. And that's what they pretty much much said, that the developers acted a little foolish, but also, again, there was just mistranslations about some of the stuff that the developers said, and it created a horrendous image about game science in the game that they were working on. And yes, that does impact sales. Maybe a little less so, because I don't think the Chinese gaming audience necessarily cares about an IGN article. But in the West, that is something that does impact a lot of developers, and we see that in the works. That's something that is creatively impacted. Whenever one developer says something about X game, they look to that criticism and they try to rectify that in future products, which is also why we end up in this landscape in which everything is so politically correct. Now look, Black Myth Wukong is not without its concerns or issues. I talked about the technical problems that a lot of reviewers have run into, and there was also the fact that a lot of reviewers did not get PlayStation 5 codes. This is something that happened with Cyberpunk 2077 all those years ago, and we all know what CD Projekt Red at that time were trying to hide. I don't think it's necessarily on this scale, but again, there are issues on the PlayStation 5 that a lot of these outlets have been bringing up, and I think that is a correct criticism to bring up in a review. But then we get into the actual nonsense. This is the main point of this video. It's this Screen Rant review, which is Black Myth Wukong, the Souls-like action hype train is a little off rails. And yeah, this is the lowest review for the game right now, and I take massive issue with the characterization or what they concentrate on this review. And it's specifically, they talk about the pros. They give the game 3 out of 5 stars, so a 6 out of 10. Combat is fluid and fun. Cinematography can be breathtaking at times. Great diversity in items and mechanics. All that sounds great. And then they talk about game performance is unpolished. Obviously, that's a valid criticism. Lacking in inclusivity and diversity of a game about Chinese mythology. That is rather baffling in my opinion. And then gameplay becomes repetitive over time. Another major criticism. And then as we go further into this review, this is the proper explanation that they have for raising this as a critique. Largely lacks inclusion and representation. And they say, while many analysis and reviews of Wukong remain focused on gameplay, which crazy concept that a game concentrates on gameplay in a review, you know, the actual contents of a game. That's, I guess it's not expected in reviews nowadays. Then they bring up, it's important to mention the controversy surrounding the game studio. Of course, we got to bring that stuff up, of course. And the reports of misogyny, sexism from the developers. Playing as a female gamer allowed me to notice issues surrounding inclusion and representation. As far as chapters 1 and 2, while characters are clearly fictitious and fantastical creatures, there were no female or feminine NPCs, enemies, or bosses present. It really is baffling the criticisms that games media comes up in their coverage, because this is just truly insane reaching in my opinion. The only exception, if you can call it a female, is the boss named Mother of Stones in Chapter 2, which is nothing more than a still glowing rock with no abilities being guarded by other enemies. It continues. The lack of diversity and inclusivity resonates with those type of comments reported to have been made by the developers, which expressed disdain for women playing their games. Although Black Myth Wukong does have truly enjoyable moments, the underlying feeling that women aren't welcome in this world felt present throughout my gameplay experience. And I guess their conclusion to that is because there's not a lot of females within this adaptation from an actual piece of Chinese mythology source material. Again, it truly sounds like a massive reach in my opinion. It is worth noting that the game is based on the novel, again, Journey to the West, which does consist of a few important female characters. To not include any woman or only include a few in an adaptation means for a modern audience is quite disconcerting. And again, this is also in the lens of a Western journalist on an Eastern area that doesn't have the same politics, same beliefs as us, which I do think that is something that needs to be factored into this discussion. But the issue with this is I don't even think they've played the full game. They just talk about them playing chapters 1 and 2. And within the actual trailers and gameplay, we do see that there are female characters that are within this. So I do wonder how much of this they even played before coming to this specific conclusion and, you know, making it a major criticism within their own review. While this doesn't take away from the exhilaration and fun of boss fights themselves, women fans of Souls-like games may have a different perspective, especially given that, according to reports, the developer also suggested that women aren't capable of enjoying or being skilled at these type of games. And again, some of this is just blasphemous. The developer Game Science has, I don't think that there's any proof that they actually said that women aren't skilled enough or enjoy these type of games. But one thing that has become abundantly clear with this review is that raising this criticism of representation and inclusivity in a game that you're playing as a fucking monkey is, one, ridiculous, and two, it raises issues with the rest of this review, in which all these other criticisms, it kind of feels like it's all being said in bad faith. We did see other articles. This is some other very interesting things that the developers behind Game Science have done. This was something that I thought was fake at first, but Black Myth Wukong influencers asked to leave politics, COVID, and feminist propaganda out of coverage. This is a document that the game's marketing team has been circulating online. It wasn't sent to actual journalists or any people that reviewed the game, but it was sent to some streamers. This is something that was confirmed by a couple of different outlets. The document sent to influencers and streamers by Hero Games, the marketing team for Wukong's developer and publisher Game Science, and it mentions these include things that they don't want being talked about: insulting other influencers or players, that's a common thing; using offensive language or humor, again, very common; using trigger words like quarantine, isolation, or COVID-19, and discussing China game industry policies, opinions, news, etc., which that is rather interesting. I do think that the criticism of the Chinese government is something that they don't want to have talked about in these reviews, but I also do think that the other stuff about, female propaganda, I do think that is more striking to the coverage that has been surrounding this game, and I do think that they just want the coverage to be focused on the game and not about the studio and some of the controversy surrounding them. And again, there seems to be a lot of divisive opinions about the coverage, specifically around the studio, and whether, like the IGN report we talked about earlier, is a valid criticism, as there's been a lot of gamers that have called out that, saying that there's mistranslations and there's issues with IGN's conclusions that they're making based off of clear jokes, and even some Chinese female gamers have called out that coverage. And also, again, IGN putting in their articles saying that they talked to some Chinese gamers, female gamers, and said that that is their overall perspective, the entire country, over 1 billion players. I just find that a little bit, it's ludicrous in my opinion. And yeah, there is definitely some of these outlets, such as The Gamer, trying to take down this game. I find it absolutely ridiculous. I don't really understand the reasoning of this. Black Myth Wukong's PR strategy of silence has failed, and I don't think it has failed. It's been massively successful. People are mostly just talking about the game. Obviously, there has been some attention to this, maybe, to the Twitter sphere, but nobody else, to those 1.5 million players on Steam right now, they don't care about any of this. They just want to play a fun game, and from all the reviews, it does seem to be a fun gameplay experience, which is what most people care about in their games. And look, the review process, what we have seen from the gaming industry, such as these, articles and stuff coming from Screen Rant, which they make something that really isn't about the game a major criticism of reviews. This is a problem, and I think Black Myth Wukong perfectly exposes this as a major problem that is only continuing, and it will not stop with this gaming industry. And I understand some people like to say that maybe most reviews are about the actual game, this is just an outlier, but there is a common theme with all of this. Kingdom Come Deliverance, we had multiple critical reviews, such as this one from Eurogamer, which says history is a double-edged sword. They took issues with the historical accuracy claims by the developers, so much so they brought in their own historian, which I guess tried to dispute Kingdom Come Deliverance and what it was all about. The Witcher 3 is too white. This is a perspective that Polygon and other outlets ran with. I guess they took issue with the Polish culture, which was at the center of this game, and its source material. We saw that also with Wired, with Hogwarts Legacy. They gave the game a 1 out of 10. There is no magic in Hogwarts Legacy. A 1 out of 10. And their explanation for this was pretty much, we don't like J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling didn't have any involvement with the game's development. And if you actually play Hogwarts Legacy, it pretty much goes out of its way to distance itself from J.K. Rowling's point of view, but this reviewer didn't care about that. And they just blatantly lie about the experience and make up stuff. The story is rooted in anti-Semitic tropes. That is not true at all. You play it, you know that's total bullshit. But the problem is, these reviewers, there's no consequences for this nonsense. And the more that they perpetuate these perspectives, the more that it gets ingrained in the culture of gaming and just really entertainment in general. And yes, it does impact creatives to cater to their perspectives, unfortunately. Deadspin, this was another thing that, I mean, if you're looking for a game that was impacted, Spider-Man was, yeah, it was a lot about, Peter Parker working with cops in that experience. I think there was a cop, female cop that we work with. She helps us navigate stuff, and I didn't really notice it as an issue, but a number of outlets such as Deadspin didn't like the fact that we were pretty much being a cop, which feels like it's something that is centered to Peter's identity, you know, stopping criminals. But I guess during this period of time, which was 2018, 2019 at the time that this was published, they didn't like it because of the real world politics that were going on. And look, in future games, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man Miles Morales, they went away from that, and I do wonder if, again, this perspective changed that. And I think there are some interviews that indicate that. Cyberpunk 2077, again, there was a lot of controversy with trans characters before the release, and again, this was something that was brought up in reviews, and it was total nonsense if you actually played the experience. Slant Magazine with Red Dead Redemption 2, they were upset with the social consciousness of the game. I guess they wanted the current day politics to be put in 1899. It makes no sense, but again, another thing that impacted the overall score of the game. The Division 2, this was an actual review coming from Variety for the game. By design or not, The Division 2 is political, and they go off about Tucker Carlson and guns pretty much. Then comes that wave of Tucker Carlson. Carlson's hyper-conservative news shows treats white men as victims, said gun laws represent class warfare on the day of that, and treats ours positively as blah, 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 blah. Carlson rants appear to have inadvertently birthed the world of Division. That makes absolutely no sense. There is nothing that connects Tucker Carlson with the Division 2, and it's truly insane that they come to this conclusion and make this the opening of their review of a game. Far Cry was the same thing. This was from Polygon. Far Cry 5 doesn't want to offend anyone, so will end up annoying everyone. And this review specifically is upset that the game, because it's set in Montana, doesn't take on right-wing America and Trump, pretty much. And then we infamously have the PS5 review from Kotaku, in which they were upset that we're having more white male presidents with Joe Biden or Trump as the options. That is something that they put in their review of the PlayStation 5. So I need you to understand what's happening with Black Myth Wukong right now with that Screen Rant review, which is absolutely baffling and ridiculous. It is a trend of the AAA games industry, and I think a lot of people are just sick and tired of this nonsense, but yet it has only continued. There needs to be an understanding that reviews like this and the others I brought up create an image about the games industry, that it's failing gamers with being ancient in terms of its consciousness of these modern times, and that is a complete fabrication and lie. One that has only continued, and one that has caused developers such as Insomniac to think Spider-Man being friendly with cops is actually bad. It's also why so many games have chosen to take a more politically correct path with the story and characters it's crafting, landing in a hotbed of controversy as many gamers are finally revolting against this. So Black Myth Wukong is far from perfect, and there are things to criticize, but what Screen Rant chose to critique is exactly what is wrong with modern games industry coverage that is in fact largely to blame for the current landscape we are now dealing with. Anyway, what do you make of Black Myth Wukong? Are you planning to check it out? Have you already? Let me know down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video. Consider subscribing for more videos like this in the future, and I'll see you later.